So Speak with your hosts, Rachel and Greg. We are going to be discussing what have we learned or unlearned in 2020. And I can tell you it's a whole heck of a lot for me. We would need more than the hour or 2 hours that we allowed ourselves.
Already trying to hold us hostage on our seats.
Okay, because I learned a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2020. It is a year for the books. What do you think, Grace?
This is a record-breaking year where I think it was like 2020 was like zero F's given. Everybody's going to get it. Everybody is going to get it.
And
I don't care who
everybody
you
did.
are. Everyone and their mum and their grandma and everyone that they know. Everyone's going to get it. No one was exempt from the cruel and harsh realities of 2020.
Yo. So if we could just go down the stuff that occurred in 2020 that affected us, but like affected everybody else. Because like you said, it was a groundbreaking year. So obviously the first biggest thing, and I'm going to save excuse me, save this recording for my grandchildren should I have them. The year of the grand coronavirus pandemic that really hit in March. I don't know what it was like
it,
for you, Grace, but things
I
started
think
like really shutting down in March here.
everything was in effect in March, but from what I've read is that the coronavirus that originated in Wuhan, China, it had already um, like
Taking
impacted
its
the
course.
yeah taken its course on the people of Wuhan in December of 2019,
Right.
right? And then everybody was flying all over the place. And by January, you were hearing minor reports of people being infected by it. So that by March of 2020, so many people were affected and so many people were dying that there had to be a lockdown.
Right.
But it was already making its way from Wuhan, China to the rest of the world from
Right.
December of 2019. Yeah.
I remember the beginning of February, if I'm not mistaken, is when, sorry, I apparently have a cold. It is not corona, people. Um, I
You
keep
got there
clearing
before I
my
did.
throat.
I was about to say, guys, she has the coronavirus. You
But
got there.
apparently in February is when our first documented case was here in the United States, which we have taken the lead of the least thing you ever want to take a lead in the most deaths. And I don't know if it's the most cases, but we've definitely won the medal for the most deaths, unfortunately, in the United States.
Americans are big or go home. You guys, like, you have to win at everything.
Or to your final home. Many of us went to our final homes, and definitely it's not something to make light of. I don't
Yeah.
want to make it appear that way, but if there's anything I learned in 2020 is, make the best humor that you can out of a situation that is painful. That's how I've
Of course.
made it through a lot of things in
Yeah,
2020.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we had that, and we're still going through that. It is now December of
Yeah.
2020. And this is something, of course, as human beings, we could not fathom, what was taking place, and we could never have imagined. But, for me, it was like, okay, this is going to be a short-term thing, hopefully, trying to predict a pandemic. And if there's anything I learned this year was I ain't in control of anything. I don't know anything, but neither do these politicians.
No one does.
Oh
No
my
one
God.
does. I think this has been a reality check for so many people
Yo.
that first and foremost, life is really short, you know?
Mm.
I think we live in this space where we all think we're invincible. and we have enough time. We can do
Mm,
whatever it is that we want. Um, and life switches on us quick. Do you know what
yeah.
I mean?
Oh,
Whereas like
absolutely.
no one could have anticipated something like this to happen globally. So this is not just a national thing. This is a
Mm,
global issue that has occurred for everybody and has impacted everybody emotionally, mentally, economically,
yeah.
um, physically, in every way.
Yeah.
So it's just really daunting, I think. And I think it's quite interesting that I feel like this year should have been the year where all of our prayers should have changed. Our mindset should have changed. There should have been a shift.
Oh,
And for
yeah.
some people, there has been. And, you know, unfortunately, you're always going to find people who, things haven't changed for them. But I think a lot of us, that it's created a somber spirit and a somber mood for feeling like, wow, like you said, we're not in control of anything. And this world has had enough of us, man.
Man.
This world is like, I'm sick and tired of these humans. They're like ridiculous.
And I feel like throughout the pandemic, it just kept getting realer, at least for me, it kept getting realer and realer. You know, like, okay, it's only going to be 3 months, and then, oh, maybe one more month, and here we go, 6 more months. Like, I started to learn to stop trying to predict what I don't know, and which is a bigger life lesson. Like,
Hmm.
you there was no way to predict how this pandemic could have gone, and the more I tried to make my guesstimations, the wronger I was, and I learned
Never
to
wrong.
like finally just give up on any type of estimations. Like, it is what it's gonna be.
You're absolutely right. I didn't find myself making any estimations. I
Mm,
just didn't know. But the one thing that I was really shocked about is how long the lockdown went on for.
mm. And it's still going on for.
Exactly. Like I was super shocked by that because it's almost like, again, because obviously politicians don't know what they're doing, but it's almost like because this has never happened in our lifetime, it's like
Hmm.
you almost took them at their word because it's like, all right, 3 months, 3 months became 6 months, like you were saying, 6 months, 9 months, and then it's been a year. We've been in our houses, locked up, and we're still like, what the F is going on?
Yeah.
What is happening? Like that's how I feel about this whole thing. It's like very disorientating.
Yeah. And I have to say, when I think of the politicians and truly saw the level of winging it that was occurring right before my very eyes, I have to say it gave me encouragement. And this might sound weird, but I felt like if they could do that, I could definitely do that. Like, I gained a lot of confidence in that area. And I'll talk about Trump. For me, the biggest thing I have learned from the Trump presidency is, yo, literally anybody could be president. I could be president. I mean, I wasn't born in the US, so technically I can't. But the competency that it takes to be a president, the level of low competency that I have been privy to over these past 4 years, I'm like, yeah. And especially with how the coronavirus was handled,
Mm,
or I would
mm,
say not handled,
mm.
it gives me utter confidence that I am a very intelligent person and I could do whatever it is I put my mind to. So I
For
can take
sure.
for that
For
Trump
sure.
and the rest of the politicians that were winning it.
I felt as an
Wait.
outside looking in,
Mm,
and I think with the rest of the world looking in, because I think um, when we speak about the states, it's very much um, them versus the world. I feel like that's the American mentality,
for
because it's
those
like
of you who
us.
don't know, I'm sorry to cut you, Grace. Grace is obviously not in the States. I'll let you elaborate on that, Grace. Um,
No, I'm an outsider, guys. I'm an outsider. I'm a foreigner, an immigrant. Um, no, guys. I'm from the UK, but I originate from the Democratic Republic of Congo,
yeah.
which is Central Africa. For those of you who don't know, but it's my thoughts on it is very much of how a lot of us outside of the States look in, you know, because I feel like Americans have this thing where it's like everything is all encompassing and they don't see how others look at them or how people view
Yeah.
um, all the things that are going in internally,
Right.
politically. Um, it seemed, you're absolutely right. There was a lot of incompetent um,
No,
behaviors
seriously.
going on in the White House, but what we saw was how far money can take you, you know,
Mm.
how far money can take you. Because Trump isn't, I'm sure Trump isn't the first incompetent president who's just on a different level as other presidents, right? Because I remember prior to Trump, I think you guys' punching bag was George W. Bush, right? Because he was
Oh, you
literally
mean
a flop,
okay?
right?
So we're skipping over President Obama. You're saying like the last incompetent one? That
Yeah, that was
yeah,
like overtly called out to be incompetent,
yeah,
overtly like
yeah,
ridiculed everywhere.
yeah.
You know,
It's true.
because
It's true.
think about it, right? And it was one of those things where it's like this is someone who still had high education and came from a political family. But what we saw was money can take you far as long
Mm,
as you have the finances to call the shot, to buy the right people or buy the right influence, or whatever it is that you've got going for you, you can do whatever it is you want. And I don't think it was like a competent thing. It
right,
was more to do of acquiring power and amassing a lot of wealth to
right,
be able to kind of delegate, or to hold on to that power, or hold on to whatever it is, that influence that you wanted, being in the White House.
right.
That's how I saw it, and many people who I know
It
saw
looks
it.
like that to us too. Trust me, it does.
Yeah,
It also
money. I
looks
think
like
money
that to
plays a
us.
big thing,
Yeah,
because there's people who are really qualified for that position, for that post,
man.
but why aren't they there? Do you know what I mean?
And I know this year or this election, I'm not a big political person, I would say, and though that's changing around for me bit by bit, I do try to keep some type of information base around politics, just
Mm,
some. And
mm,
from what I've learned is that there have been a record number of minorities, specifically African Americans, that have been voted into politics, either Congress. I know we have a new Black mayor that had a fade. What was that? Was it Maryland? Was it DC? It was one of those. Yo, it was an afro with a tape up, something like that, which made me so proud. So honestly, with the whole money can take you everywhere, that's a way that we all look at it. But it's
mm.
also a yo, if they can do it, we can do it. Because I have to
That
say,
goes
and I
without question.
appreciate
Yeah.
this.
I say that goes without saying. Absolutely, that goes without saying. You
Yeah,
know?
there's a level of appreciation in seeing the the pure stupidity that has occurred, because there's no pretense, like you said. Because like say with Bush, there was still like a veil of,
Yeah,
perhaps they are from a different world and they're
yeah.
more
There was
on a pedestal. With Trump,
absolutely, everything
girl,
was revealed. Everything
yeah,
was
we're
out.
like, yeah, nah, I can do better than this.
And you know what's
So
really scary about this whole thing was the lack of shame. I think that's what shocked me the most, where there was like no shame, there was like no embarrassment, no sense of awareness,
not on his
like
part.
yeah, on his part.
I
That's
was
what I
here
found
embarrassed every
astounding.
day. I was,
But that's what I'm
oh
saying.
my
The American
God.
people was, but I was like, as an individual, someone who just zero F's given. Like they did not
No.
budge, they did not flinch, they didn't care. Like to
And the
be
people
that
who followed
careless,
him, I'm like, I don't,
like
no
I,
comprende.
I'm telling you, like I've never been in that mindset of not caring to that level. That's like elite, Super Saiyan, samurai, ninja type of level of zero fucks given. Like I would
Yeah,
do
it's
those,
true. It's true.
you
So I
know.
learned in 2020, I could be me a politician if I really wanted to be. There is not a whole heck of a lot that is needed but money, of course, will take you many places. So
For sure.
I did learn that in 2020. And of course, what we have known as people of color for a long time, the police brutality that was revealed in 2020. And I would say it was a combination of being home. A lot of people were restless, and of course looking for outlets to spend your time. We had a lot of time. uh, I feel like the protests that took place, and they were protests all over the world
Yeah.
for the unfortunate murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
We, of course, Breonna Taylor,
Mm-hmm.
um, other names that I do not have at my disposal right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this year, because of the place where we were in, we were forced to sit in our discomfort. I have seen this handled differently,
Mm-hmm.
um, for in the positive way.
Mm-hmm.
So 2020 in that way has taught me that when we are forced, and then by default then ready to look at something in its face, look at a problem in its face,
Mm-hmm.
just how many big changes can be made. It's not to the satisfactory level yet, but I haven't seen
Absolutely.
it this progressive um,
And
all at once
aggressive.
before. And oh man. And
Yeah,
then we
and
had the
aggressively.
Beckys and the corner store Carolyns, and yeah, all of that stuff.
Barbecue Becky.
Yo,
um,
barbecue Becky.
I was dying. Look, what I found was that in regards to police brutality and all this stuff that was happening globally, this is another thing. I think that's the key word for this year was global.
Yeah, global.
Nothing was done in small increments.
You're so
Everything was
right.
done
Yeah,
in a huge, a large, like intense full, like you
level.
couldn't contain
Yes.
it in a different level,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Um, so I felt like everybody was held to task. Everybody was, hey, what are you going to do about it? Everybody was
Right,
held responsible for their actions, right?
right,
No one can turn away. No one could ignore what was
right.
happening
Yep,
because they were put to the test. They were put to,
right,
okay, you're saying one thing with your mouth, show us with your actions.
right,
You say you believe this, show us and prove to us, right? Whether it be your allyship, whether it be, oh, I have black friends, or do you know what I mean? People
right,
who it's performative activism, right? Where
right.
it's like, oh my gosh, I have five black friends, and I have a black family member, and my dog's friend's son, husband, cousin is black, and do you know what I mean?
Okay,
Like
yep.
all of these different things, and it's like people, their hands were held to the fire,
Yeah,
you know. And it's not just with police brutality. I think all throughout the year, we were all tested and we were held to the fire,
definitely,
right? And
definitely.
you either stood it or it crushed you.
Yeah,
That was that.
yeah, it's so true. So those were just some of the outward phenomenon that we had to deal with, that we all experienced together. We experienced together, but differently. So this is the type of year that I have been sitting under. And boy, this year, like you said, as far as being brought to fire, either burn or and ash up, or rise as smoke. And
Mhm.
at times I felt I was doing both up in this piece. I felt
Mm,
like I smothered out, then I transcended, and then I
mm.
evaporated, and then I and then I solidified. I mean, it felt like this is the type of year it was for me.
A real science
So
project.
yo, yes. I went through all the, how you say, the phases. I was
Yeah.
liquid, I was gas, I was
Solid.
solid. Oh my
For
God.
sure.
So let me see, because I kind of wrote down the stuff that I really experienced this year, what I learned. And the number one thing, the number one thing I learned this year was how to balance my nervous system.
Oh, tell us
That,
more.
yo, so I finally have realized. So this year for me has been, oh my God, it's been trial under fire. Here we go with the fire again. And
Baptism
quite
under fire for sure.
trial by fire. I resigned from my job,
Mm,
and I resigned from my job without another job, yo. And I never do that. I never. So the type of pushing that I got, the type of pressure that I got to rely on God to be like, you know what, God, this is what I believe I am being led to, and I am just going to do it, because I felt like if there was another there's no better time than to do it now, because we're in
mm,
the middle of a pandemic. We are The time is primed to be home,
mhm,
basically.
mhm,
So after the difficulties that I'd undergone, and it went to HR level
mhm,
in my job, back and forth of HR, where I thought
mhm,
I was just going to lose it.
mm,
Um, but I did not. I really learned that whatever trauma that I had, and I've gone through a lot of trauma, and I think we can also do an episode on that. But whatever trauma that I had, it was important for me to learn that I can transcend this. Like
mm,
life can be better for me. Because that's a thing I think about childhood trauma, or any trauma that you experience that's personal, or maybe any type of trauma. It's that you don't believe that you're ever going to have a time when you can go beyond that. Like you're always going to carry this burden with you, and especially if it's a burden I've been carrying for at least 30 years,
wow.
so I'm familiar with this burden, and in unfortunate ways I am familiar and comforted by this very thing that makes me uncomfortable. So I learned that, you know what? The trauma is not something I'm ever going to be able to take away. What actually happened, that cannot be taken away, nor the
Yeah.
memories of that can be taken away. But
Mhm,
transcending that and not carrying that pain, because there is a difference of having experienced the pain, and even if you don't learn from the pain, you gonna leave the pain behind and take the lessons with you. And I think that has been the problem. Not I think it has been the problem for me, where I've carried the pain with me because I never learned that I can separate the two. I never
mm,
learned that.
mm,
So, with the balancing of the nervous system, what happens is we either get immobilized, which is like a form of depression, or anything
mhm,
where you feel like what has happened to you has frozen you
mhm,
in time. Or we go through a phase where we are stressed out and angered by the
mhm,
situation.
mhm,
So we can go from either one of those things. We can stay in one, or we transfer from one to the other. But the true goal is to go from being immobilized, if you were, being mobilized and being angry and stressed out, but to go into an area of transcendence and finding peace. So in order to do that, what I have learned, damn it, and this is so valuable for me, is to really listen to my body, what my body, the tensions that I'm experiencing, the fears and the panics that I experience, because these are how these things come up, the immobilization or the mobilization. You will feel, at least for me, I feel panic sometimes, or I feel like fear, like I don't, or procrastination, any of those things I
mhm,
feel. Whenever I feel them, I stop and
Mhm.
I pay attention, and quite literally I ask myself, what is happening?
Mhm.
And once after being able to do that, if you are listening to yourself, like if you take the time out, yourself will respond.
Mhm.
And what I've experienced is me having flashbacks when I've
Mhm.
asked my body, okay, what is this? Flashbacks
Mhm.
that I wouldn't even think connect to
Mhm.
what it is that I'm experiencing. And after having a conversation with myself, sometimes it's my younger self, most times it's my younger self, and going through that memory and then reminding that self, but hey, I'm an adult now. We're older
Mhm.
and we can take care of situations. We've learned how to deal with this. And if we cannot deal with it by ourselves, we have resources. I literally have conversations with myself that way. And the tension, it transcends and it dissipates. And then
Mhm.
I'm able to move forward. So
Mhm.
for me, that has been the most transformative thing I've learned this year, because through that, I am getting past my procrastinations and my fears, and I am
Mhm.
accomplishing many things in my life
Mhm.
for myself. So
Mhm.
I know that was quite long, um, but I have really learned how to do that in 2020. And I think it's because of all of this learning how to sit in discomfort and
Mhm.
then hearing what the discomfort is trying to tell you, because that's what it is now. It's not,
Mhm.
it used to be something where I felt that discomfort, I would distract myself from it because I didn't want to
Mhm.
feel it.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure.
So it's something where I've gone into the discomfort and I'm like, okay, discomfort, what is it that you're telling me? And that's what it is. It's giving you a signal of something that needs to be paid attention to. So this has changed my
That's
life.
amazing.
So
I'm telling you, I what you said was quite interesting to me about your younger self usually being the one who's speaking to you in those moments. It just goes to show how powerful our younger selves, our younger voices, should I say,
yeah,
really are, and
yeah,
how impactful our our earlier days are as we're growing and learning,
yeah,
and how things can affect us negatively for
right,
the worse or for the better. You know, things are positive that we can keep to help us grow. But
right,
it's really those moments that really kind of define us to the point where that's who we hear from most of the time,
yeah,
more than any other voice, you know?
yeah,
And it's always defined by past hurts or past brokenness and past failures or past traumas. And you're still trying to unlearn everything and trying to teach that voice that, hey, this is not how we do things anymore.
right,
You know, we have to change. We can't keep on doing this. We can't, you know, keep on living like this.
right,
Um, and that in itself is powerful because a lot of us don't recognize what that voice is or who that voice is.
right,
We tend to say, "Oh, this is not how I feel." And I remember I used to do that all the time. I just feel like that. I feel sad. I feel down. I feel
right,
confused. I feel hurt. And you're speaking from a place of now and not from the place of the past self or the past traumas um, rearing its ugly head again.
right, right. And I tend to think that the reason that those voices are so strong from the past is that taught to, we were not healthily taught how to cope. So
Yeah.
you are stuck there because you weren't taught how to be unstuck. You
Hmm.
taught you like it was a something where we were told to shove it away, or even if we weren't told to shove it away, we didn't know what to do with it, we shoved it away. So in essence it never got to finish its process. So
Hmm.
with speaking with that voice now, the process is being completed. We're being the
Hmm.
adults that we needed to tell us, hey, this is okay. Because that's a lot of times is what we need. We need it, like as a child you need to be comforted, you need to be told this is okay, or you have support, or you don't need to worry, it's going to get better. Those little things are huge to a child. And those are the things that I never got, those types of reinforcements. So
Mm,
I can see, like, when I do go back and I speak to myself, for me, it's not even a long process because it's literally those little pep talks that
mm,
I needed.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us also, it's like if you weren't given the tools or allowed to finish that process, it was almost like you need to ignore it. I think that's the
Right.
biggest one that a lot of people were taught in how to
Right.
deal with
Right.
past traumas is
Right.
ignore it. It will go away,
Right.
and then we wonder why people are always, running away from responsibilities or running away
Right.
from themselves, right? It will
Yeah.
go away. You dig your head and bury your
Yeah.
head in the sand, right?
Correct.
Where it's just like, I'm going to ignore this problem, ignore it problem, and then it manifests itself into something bigger than what it initially was.
Correct.
And you're having to deal with far worse
Yes.
than you could have if you had
Yes.
dealt with it prior.
Absolutely.
But it's astonishing, really.
And I think for me, it's obvious now that it's because they didn't know. They're telling you how to handle it because it's
Absolutely.
how they handle it.
Yeah.
Um,
Trauma begets trauma.
yes. And it makes sense. I totally get it. And I find that this process also helps me to be less judgmental of others. Because I'm telling you, with my parents, I mean, I went through a lot,
Mm,
and sufficient blame and responsibility, I would call it responsibility, is to be placed on the
mhm,
adults in my life because they did fail me. I can
mm,
say they failed me.
mm,
But how can I say this? The bitterness for me that I had, and the blame and the anger isn't there for me anymore, because I recognize not only did they not know, even though their not knowing hurt the crap out of me,
mm,
um, I can now do it for myself. So I'm empowered. So now that I can do it, and I know it's something I wouldn't go forward with, with the next generation, teaching them the wrong things that I learned, it makes me feel better. Like
mm,
I get it. And especially, I think another big thing is knowing their stories,
mhm.
knowing the stories of the adults in your life.
In your life,
You
yeah.
can, because not all of us can
Mhm,
get that type of information, but that really does help. It
mhm.
really helps to
It puts
give
things
you
in perspective,
perspective. Yes.
mhm, as to why they behave the way they do
Right.
and why they choose, and the outlets that
Right.
they choose,
Right.
and how and why it affects you as the child in that relationship or that
Correct.
family.
Right. So for me, I've learned to give up that guilt or that blame or that anger. It's not there because I understand. I forgive.
Yeah,
I forgive. I understand, and I that's not to be mistaken for I it still was their responsibility. Like that is something I have a clear boundary with. It was your responsibility. You didn't know, but I have this for myself, and so I now can move forward and still have a great life. Because I think it was where I was like, I'm damaged forever, and that's where I used to put the blame on. Like, I
yeah.
am now damaged forever because of you. So that's no longer there. From knowing how to balance my nervous system,
And
it's
you know what's really
empowering.
crazy is
Mm,
like we forget that obviously we're so busy trying to deal with all these emotions and these experiences.
mm.
We forget that the way we speak to ourselves in those moments is also a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
The things we're saying to ourselves aren't true, but because we
yeah,
say it long enough, they become true,
yeah,
outside of our own desire for them to manifest themselves in those ways.
yeah,
And we find ourselves living the life that we have spoken into existence, even though that's not what we wanted for ourselves,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And as we're learning in these moments, breaking those chains as well, breaking those habits, that's also a way of freedom, isn't it?
yeah,
That's
it
also a way of
is.
like truly unlearning those bad habits to be able to overcome not just your traumas, but how you speak and conduct yourself
Yeah,
towards yourself.
yeah. I was writing this morning and I was saying, as As the tar is lifted from the diamond that is my soul, I am able to transcend my negative thoughts.
Mm.
Things that didn't seem possible
Mhm.
are now. I'm able to focus on the things that are good.
Mhm.
And the one big thing is trust. I'm able to trust in myself, trust in God, trust in people, and trust in life. And that's a thing that I'm learning from Ian Levan Vent. Like trust, I think that's what trauma and bad experiences truly rob from you. And when your trust is robbed,
Mhm.
you feel like only the things that you can see are what is possible, and only the ways that you think is possible. And so you limit, you put limits on yourself unknowingly, because I've done this many times. But when you start lifting that debris and like shining the diamond,
Mhm.
you automatically, it's not something that you need to force. It's just automatically you start to look towards the light instead
Mhm.
of what you were taught. So
Mhm.
it makes me understand why forgiveness is not necessary. Forgiveness is not necessary, but forgiveness transcends your, and I keep using transcends, it really lifts up your vibration. So it is to your detriment that you don't forgive, but you don't have to forgive, is what I'm saying. Um, but forgiveness would, it would do you very well when you're ready, and if you ever are. So yeah,
Wow.
because I hate when people say you gotta forgive. You don't got to do anything. Um, but I believe you will be limited if you don't get to that place.
I think I never used to understand why people say when you forgive, it will benefit you instead of the other person, right?
Yeah.
Because as many of you know, I'm super petty. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to forgive nobody.
Nobody.
Literally, like I grew up being like, I can hold a grudge forever.
Mm,
And I'm not even exaggerating, guys. Like, I could not speak to someone for 20 years, still being 5 years old and not living 20 years. um,
I'm like that too.
because, yeah, because of what it is that they did to me, right?
Mm,
And I
mm-hmm,
remember my mom, God bless my mom. She's so sweet and lovely. My mom has been through so much, and
mm,
she's yet still the most forgiving person I know, which I
mm,
find. I remember I used to have such resentment towards her
mm,
for being so forgiving, especially in circumstances where she wasn't to blame. Um, but I remember she would say to me, you know, forgiveness isn't for them; it was for you. It will release you, and and it will be something that does you good, because I think what's that saying? Forgiveness, no, not forgiving others is like poisoning yourself and expecting the other person to die,
to die.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm,
what they said. And I
mm-hmm,
remember going, F that, like,
mm-hmm.
I'm fine. Nobody here is dying. I can hold on to this
I ain't
grudge
dying. I don't know
for
what you're talking
sure.
about
I
with
can
your
hold on to this grudge
cliches.
literally for the
Yeah.
rest of my life. Like,
Yeah.
I will still look at you sideways every time I see you in the street, and I will still confront you about whatever it is that you did to me, like, 10 years ago. But the last 3 years, what I have found, what really clicked for me isn't just about, hey, it's about releasing you from that pain, right? It's
Mm-hmm,
not, sometimes it's not even releasing you from that pain, it's just releasing you from being controlled by that pain. You can still feel the pain, but
mm-hmm,
you're not controlled by it, right?
mm-hmm.
The shoe dropped when it was like, I don't know who said this to me, but it's like, okay, you want God to forgive you, so you need to forgive someone else. Fine, that makes sense. For those of
Mm-hmm.
us who are Christians, we
Mm-hmm.
understand that. That's
Mm-hmm.
just basic theology 101.
Right.
But it's also there are things coming your way that you're also stopping and limiting, right? By
Mm.
not forgiving other people, meaning
Mhm.
you need, if you are a believer, and that's why I'm coming from a place of believer, not that I'm
Mhm.
telling anybody how to live their lives,
Mhm. Mhm.
but God works with his own rules. He has his own laws,
Right.
right? And in order for you to really live a life that is subdued, and you are, you submit yourself under God's authority, there is nothing that you can do or obtain or gain or pray for and receive when you have an unforgiving heart. There's
Very
places
true.
that you, do you know what I mean? There's
Yeah,
places you
because
want to
those are
go.
his principles. Yeah.
Exactly. Those are his principles. You're blocking yourself
Yeah.
from getting there. And I remember someone said it quite simply. Sometimes you just need to take the L to get the blessing.
Mm.
Right. And a
Mm.
lot of the times that's how forgiveness feels like.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
Why do I need to forgive them? I was the one that was in the right. I was the one who was hurt or wronged. Why do I need to do it? And it feels like an L. Trust me, I know. Because there's so many times where I was like being convicted that I had to forgive someone and I didn't want to do it at all. And it felt like I was losing and they had won. They
Mm.
basically, they weren't even sorry or apologetic, and they still got I forgive you from me when they were undeserving, in my opinion. But who am I to say someone is undeserving, right?
Mm.
But it was one of those things where I felt like, okay, that was a loss. That was a loss. But you don't see what's happening spiritually and how
Mm.
that changes you internally. And I'm not talking about external changes, external habits that we finally change in order for us to become new people. I'm talking about deep within, from your core, from your soul, being changed within, and then all of that penetrating outwardly in order for you to move forward in
Mm.
your journey,
Mhm.
quote unquote.
My favorite word.
Literally, journey. I had to say it like that so you can get it.
Whatever,
But
Grace, whatever.
in your journey, in order for you to move forward. So that's only when the shoe dropped for me, because I literally was like, nah, I'm never gonna forgive you. Like until the day I die, I'm gonna
Mm.
hold on to a grudge. Right? It was that crazy. And when I think about it as well, that sounds like bondage. Like, why am I that aggressive about not forgiving someone? Why am I holding on to all of these different things
Mm.
for that long? Why am I holding on to pain and hurt for that long? Where I'm being, defined by my emotions, or defined by my hurt, defined by my trauma, defined by my past, where it's like I'm carrying that baggage with me everywhere I go by not forgiving, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, I literally ranted.
No,
I actually like
I
went
think that was very on
500
time.
steps left.
No, because
Yeah,
I did that too. But this forgiveness, because it also brought my thoughts in other directions. And it gives me a question for you, Grace. I think forgiveness can look different ways. I
yeah,
don't necessarily have to tell you that I forgive you, because I think certain
absolutely. I agree
situations
with that.
don't, okay, certain situations don't allow for that type of
Of
communication.
course, I
Yeah,
agree with that. I was saying in terms of this was a specific incident that
got
I
it.
was being convicted with. So it's not with every incident that
Right,
happens in my life.
right.
There
Because I
was
have
something that
also
happened.
said I forgive you too. So yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I was in a place where it was like I've said this so many times. Um, I was being stalked and haunted by the Holy Spirit, where it was literally like everywhere I went, it was like, Grace, you gotta forgive. You need to forgive. I was like, no, leave me alone. And, I would go on the train and God was like, you need to forgive. I will go on the bus. God will say, forgive. I will sleep, and I couldn't sleep because it's like, you have to forgive this person.
Damn,
But
girl.
it was that bad. And do you know why it was that bad? Because my hatred and my anger was
Was
even
that
worse.
strong? Yeah,
It was that strong, where
yeah,
it was like, those kind of that deep um vitriol that comes deep from within, where it's like you see, just seeing someone who hurt you brings back all those emotions, where it was like,
yes, yes.
I don't want to see them, I don't want to hear them, I don't want to think of, like, just, I wouldn't spit on you if you was on fire. It was that bad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I had to be hounded.
yeah.
I was stalked for, like, I don't know, half a year of,
Wow.
hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. No, I'm not doing it. It was like a mad woman walking around the street going, I'm not doing it. And there's no one
Wow.
next to me. Like, it was that bad, because it was like, I felt justified. And I think that's the worst thing a stubborn person could hold on to, being justified in your anger, right?
Yeah.
Because you know that you are the one who didn't do anything wrong. You
Yeah.
were right in this incident, and you justify that anger, you justify that frustration, that hatred to consume you, to live in you, to control you.
Yeah.
And it breeds other types of sicknesses and diseases,
It
like
really does.
and that's I think that's why I was called out on that. And when I
Yeah.
did I feel good about it? Absolutely not. I felt
No.
trash. I felt
Yeah.
like I was taking an L. I cried
Yeah.
all, I cried throughout the whole process and was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe you're punishing me for not doing anything wrong to someone, like, but it wasn't punishment, it was a release. It was
Yeah.
God's mercy on me for me to be released from all of those things that controlled me,
Yeah.
you know,
I do believe that forgiveness opens up a portal
for sure.
within us. So um, I have learned in 2020 to forgive and still have love and do it from a distance. So
Amen to
for me,
that. Distant love.
what that allows is for my two emotions to exist, to coexist at peace, because here I am knowing I have to hold a boundary because it's
Mm,
the respect for myself, like
mm,
I have to align to myself and have integrity within myself and know that I am being respectful to myself.
mm,
But the love that I have, because you can really love somebody who has mistreated you,
yeah.
like that is, and those are the two things that are hard. Like, how do I reconcile these two things? This person has mistreated me, but I love them. So
Hmm.
forgiveness for me has looked like holding my boundary of, you know what, I'm not going to accept this behavior from this person, but I love them and I still love them. And it is important that I actually say that within myself so that inside of me, I'm not in conflict. Because
Hmm.
usually I think forgiveness, we're like, oh, then that means I have to um, either have happy emotions with that person,
Hmm.
or holding my boundary means if I'm not speaking to you, I have to hate you, right? So then you have
Hmm.
emotions within you that they're not true,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm.
So holding a boundary and respecting yourself and knowing that you're doing right by you
Hmm.
is something that's so, I feel whenever I can do that, I feel so good because I'm
Hmm.
advocating for myself, just like I
Hmm.
would do for somebody that I love. So I'm
Hmm.
advocating for myself that I love. I'm
Hmm.
saying, nah, you cannot deal with that, Rachel. It's not right. You're not being treated right. And
Hmm.
then on the same token, I'm like, I love this person though. And it's
Hmm.
okay to love them.
From
Know that
afar.
I exactly know that I need that distance and I don't
Hmm.
have to hate you. So
Hmm.
I within myself now I'm not in conflict. I love
Hmm.
you, but I'm keeping my distance. And
Hmm.
that this kind of goes along with not needing validation from others. That's
Hmm.
another thing I learned in
Hmm.
2020. I do not need validation from a person. I need to know that I am right with God. And that's a process for me a lot of the
Hmm.
times to understand that I'm doing the right thing.
Hmm.
And I am respecting myself and I am doing this wisely. Even if it doesn't feel good, I'm going about this the right way. So as
Hmm.
long as I am aligned with God, I don't need for everybody to agree with me.
Amen to
And
that.
that's freeing. I learned to
Amen to
let go
that.
of validation. It's like, I don't need the validation. The only validation I need is from God, basically.
Amen. Amen to that.
Join us next week for part 2 of What Did We Learn and Unlearn in 2020.
podcast, every single episode we have ever recorded, because this has been my lesson all year, was learning how to set boundaries first and foremost, because I had none.
Mm,
Hooray! I had no
mm,
boundaries, right?
mm,
And I gave so much of myself. I gave so much of
wow.
myself, and I still struggle here and there. You know, it's
Mm-hmm,
not to say like I've totally mastered
mm-hmm,
setting boundaries with other people, but this is the year where I learned to say no. This is the year where I learned to step back
mm-hmm.
and to really assess the relationships that I had. And this was the
A
year
big thing
where
in 2020, yeah.
yeah, where I understood that I had to be more mindful of who I spent my time with or who I
Mm,
chased after. And
mm,
it's about quality of people, not quantity of people you have in your
mm.
life. And when we
You
focus
don't
on the
preach.
quality of people, um, that desire of quantity is lost, that desperation is gone.
Mm,
That's
mm,
what I was struggling with.
mm.
Um, if you haven't listened to the rest of our podcast thus far, um, the interesting thing is like I'm an expat. I live expatriate. I live in the Middle East, and the one thing about having a lifestyle like this is you're not in your hometown.
Mhm,
You're not with your family,
right.
and everybody who is living the same lifestyle as you are, you know, they're far away from home.
Mm-hmm,
But it's such a lonely lifestyle when you are alone.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes it's not just about being alone. It's
mm-hmm,
sometimes you have family with you, or but building relationships, new relationships, is very difficult
mm-hmm.
being an expatriate,
Yeah.
right? And for those of you who are listening, you know, some of you maybe you grew up in military bases in different
Mm-hmm,
countries. You would
mm-hmm,
understand what that is, or
mm-hmm.
just growing up in different countries because your parents worked everywhere else, or they traveled, or you had to travel for school or something. But um, depending on what country you move to, it can get very, very lonely in
Mm-hmm.
building relationships.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that for a really, really long time
Right.
in wanting to build connection but not finding it. And then this feeling of desperation growing because it's like you're trying to make things happen on your own. You're
Yeah.
trying to force things to happen because of how you feel.
Right.
And quality is lost in that process
Right.
because you're giving everything, you're putting yourself out there so much that people are like, look at this chump. I'll take, 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 take.
Right.
And I don't need to do anything in the process, right? And this year was really a lesson of me understanding that, yes, not everybody is going to like it when you say no. When not everybody's going to like it when you say enough, right?
Right.
Because they're expecting that from you because they're used to that kind of behavior, right?
Right.
Um, so being okay with that was the most difficult thing for me to comprehend this year
Right.
because I was such a yes person of, okay, I'll do that. I will go above and beyond for people and not expecting anything in return, but still feeling violated after all of that because I know that I was being treated badly. But because so and so was my friend or so and so was someone I cared about,
Mm-hmm.
you basically take it, you tolerate it, right? So what happened this year? I started to say no and I became the bad guy.
Right.
I started to say no, and slowly but surely, every single person in the relationships that I had in my life started to rearrange themselves to
Mm.
the rightful positions, right?
Mm. I like that.
So you really get to see who's who,
Yes.
what,
Yep.
what's these relationships built upon, what are
Mm-hmm.
the values, were they even real relationships, were they
Mm-hmm.
really needed or necessary, can I live without this person? Yes, of course we all can, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in those moments we feel like we need to save these relationships, and the crazy thing is we're the only people doing the work to save these relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and the people on the other end are like, F it, we don't
Yeah.
care. Do what you got to do. I'm not trying to, you know, make the effort and be in a relationship with you or be in a friendship with you. So I really took the time to basically phase people out or really just
Mm.
cut people off or
Mm-hmm.
stand up for myself where it's like, no, I saying, I'm not happy with that. We're not going to do that. I'm not interested. I don't want to. And I think in society, it's seen as rude by saying,
Right.
I don't want to do it just because. You have to make up an excuse, apparently. You have to have a reason. And I found that people are so shocked by that. It's like a double take. You what? I don't want to do that. What do you mean you don't
Right.
want to do that? I'm not comfortable and I don't want to. You
Yeah,
can't
because
make me.
like, why pose it as a question if you're not trying to let it be a choice? Like,
And I'm telling you, bro.
you
And it's
asked me if I
like,
wanted to, and I
and I said
politely said
no.
no.
Why are you mad though?
But why? But
That's what I'm
why?
saying. It was insane because you see people are like looking at you twice, like you are the B word, essentially. You're
Right.
being a total B. And I was like, all right, fine. The more I did that, the worse things got.
Mm,
And I realized those were the right people to not be around because
yes,
I
I
knew
love
what
how you
is
said
it that
that.
they wanted and what their agenda was.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned 2020.
I
Boundaries,
really,
quality. Yeah,
I'm so sorry if I
it's
interrupted.
okay.
I
Go
didn't
for
mean
it.
to.
No, no, go for it. I'm done.
No, I was just going to say, I really am a huge fan of the sit back and let people reveal, not relieve themselves, because I don't need to be seeing all of that.
Relieve themselves in front of
And
you. That's
sometimes it does look
hilarious.
like they're relieving themselves on me, but
Yeah, because they're full of shit.
yes, but I am such a big fan of letting people reveal themselves to me. And that requires patience. It is something I haven't learned in until my 30s, into my mid 30s, because I never wanted to sit and think that somebody didn't like me, that
Oh
somebody
my
didn't want to be
goodness.
around me, that anything that was uncomfortable, which is why I had my issues with food, um,
Yeah.
and eating. Any feeling of discomfort was my enemy, which it is not. I have learned. So it is something that I've had to sit through uncomfortably and watch a person find their place in my life and not just place them where I want them to be. That
Yeah.
is such a valuable thing that anybody can do for themselves, honestly, because
I'm
you
telling
get
you.
to see truth. You're letting the universe or the world, or you're letting things fall into place without that control, because you really don't control it.
Yeah.
Because if you're forcing it, you're manipulating it, and it ain't real. It ain't
It
real.
does wonders. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
It
so I'm
does
such a big fan of that.
such wonders for you and your peace. First and foremost, you're not surrounded by people who are parasites
Right.
and they're not sucking out your joy, your love, your peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
some of those different things. But also, you're creating a safe space for healthy relationships. Like,
Yes.
that's what I truly, truly desired and I'm working on and learning is creating healthy relationships,
Mm.
creating safe spaces where you can be yourself authentically.
Right.
um, you can be yourself, and there's none of this hiding and mistrust and emotional games and manipulations and all of these different things, toxic relationship traits that everybody seems to gravitate towards.
Right.
But really just being in a place where you're like, you know what, I've got good people around me. And we
Yeah.
talked about this in a couple of episodes before, building a team of
Right.
the right people around you, the right support system by having quality people, even if that's one person, to me,
Right.
that's a win,
Yeah.
right? Um, so I took a beating because I felt like the fangs and the claws were out to get me all throughout the
Right.
year because of the people I was dealing with. But praise God, we've made it December 2020. I'm still here and
Yeah.
I have overcome.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure it out. That doesn't mean I have all the answers, but I like the path that I have taken for
Yeah.
sure. And the one prayer that I said to myself is there's certain people I don't want to bring with me in 2021.
Mm.
Lord help me to do that because I'm not going to 2021 with a whole bunch of people that are not of growing together
Right.
as two individuals who can help each other and really be there for one another and support one another.
Right.
That's what I mean by that.
Right. And I think this is so much, and I'm still trying to formulate this thought. I think it's so much more progressive than, like, say, just cutting somebody off,
Yeah.
because if you're allowing a process to play itself out, then the inevitable is going to happen. So if it's that this person is not to be in your life, that is where you will see things going. And if this person is to be in your life, that is where you will see it going. So
Mm,
it's not something where, again, you've taken over the control and like ended a process before it's time. You let
mm,
it play out. And I find that it is, though it's painful, again, you
mm,
find that peace and you know you've done the right thing for yourself.
mm,
Um, so, along with this, because I think this is kind of linked, in 2020 for me, I've learned to stop assigning emotions that I believe people have to them. I have stopped doing that joint.
what do you
So,
mean?
to be more
If you can just.
specific, is okay. So again, back to my childhood trauma, because it was such a big thing I carried in my life. With my family, I experienced abuse that was not believed, right? And which for me was doubly impactful. You know, I experienced abuse and then it wasn't believed. But I assigned certain thoughts that I think was going through the minds of the adults. So I was like, oh, my mother must not like me, or my family, you know, it's all me. The fault is mine, and they're looking at me like I'm the problem. But
Mm,
as I was writing, because I'm writing my book, and I think there are two crafts that I have been a part of that kind of allows your understanding of a human being to grow exponentially.
mm,
Writing about them
mm,
and acting, because these are two things. Like, if you're acting someone, if you're, acting that character, you have to have a level of understanding to be that person or to be able to portray that person honestly.
mm,
And when you're writing about them, it's, to me, it's very similar to acting. Like, there has
mm,
to be an understanding that you have, rather than you coming from where you are and
mm,
projecting what you think from where you are. So when
mm,
you step into a person's shoes, it's a whole different situation. So
mm,
as I've started writing about my grandmother, because I'm on her right now, and I've kind of touched on my mother, I'm not up to her yet. I
mm,
really feel like I understand more, because
mm,
my mother came from also a family that was abusive.
mm,
Um, Her mother was uh, beat by my grandfather. So
mm,
my grandmother and grandfather, they were in a domestic violence living situation. So
mm,
my mother was a product of that, and she also, all children that observe abuse, or whoever's within your vicinity where
mm,
abuse is happening, everybody is affected.
mm,
So I started to think of my mother. Okay, so she was in a family that was abusive. She now comes out, like, she's now gets married. And I'm thinking, this is her way of getting away, of escaping. And
mm,
now she's in a marriage, and she's thought, because who among us, with how society has taught us, do not think that marriage or someone else can save our lives, can make things different, can make your reality something that you never thought it could be.
mm,
So I'm now thinking of my mother. She probably was thinking that, like, she is escaping this reality with her
Mhm.
to find that that husband of hers was a source of abuse to her child. So
Mhm.
now that she's experiencing that, it's like a reality that she cannot come to terms with, because this is
Mm.
not what she set out to do. So now it's like it's an embarrassment. She doesn't know how to handle, what is she supposed to do? Um Divorce, that's not how I saw my life, that's not how I saw myself. Now my family is talking bad about me. I'm thinking all of
Mm.
these things she was probably processing. But
Mhm.
as a child, and with my limited understanding, and I was to be protected. I'm
Mhm.
That's not something that I am downplaying at all. But I can now see that it wasn't only something about love, and if it was about love of me, my mother's love on me reflects on her love of herself, because
Mhm.
I am from her. So
Mhm.
if she could not protect me, or felt she could not, it's it's to the extent that she felt she couldn't protect herself or
Mm.
love herself. It is a direct reflection of that, rather than, oh, my family doesn't love me or care about me. Like, I stopped assigning um, emotions on how it looked on the outside. And I think that's so helpful. Like, say with these toxic people that we're dealing with forward 2020 or 2019,
Yeah.
like, okay, you are behaving passive aggressively with me. Yes, that is what I see, but I do not know how you feel about me. And that is
Yeah.
not my business. I
Mhm.
know that this behavior isn't healthy for me. So I
Mm.
am going to find a way to hold my boundary and have
Mhm.
respect for myself. But once
Mhm.
I start assigning how you feel about me, it's more
Mhm.
hurtful. It's
Mhm.
more hurtful. And I'm making up stories that are only painful to me.
Mhm.
I don't need to make up how you feel. I don't need to
Mhm.
know none of that. I just
Mhm.
need to know how to move forward. And I
Yeah.
find that that's so freeing, instead of,
Mhm.
oh, you know what? She probably doesn't like me, or she doesn't love me anymore, or meanwhile, it's their coping mechanisms. It's because of how they grew up, or because of how they see situations. So
Mhm.
that, it just takes away a level of burden that I don't
Mhm.
need to carry. So I have
Mm.
found that in 2020, it's like, oh, okay, I don't know how you feel, but I know what you're doing, and that
Mhm.
and that 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 cannot work between us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a long
Um,
explanation, but
no, but it's amazing. And I think also you don't have to make up reasons as to why they don't like you.
right,
Because you can have, oh, they don't like me anymore, they don't know. But a lot of the times we break it down to, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe
right,
I'm the problem, maybe this is the root of it. You're trying
right,
to figure these things out and
right,
wasting yourself away and
correct,
still never getting the right explanation or the
right,
truthful answer, right?
yeah,
And it just becomes a waste of time.
yes,
And that's something that we do in every situation, whether it be in the work incident where it's like, why is it that they won't treat me right? Why is it that they won't do this? What did I do? Could I have done this? Shoulda, woulda, coulda, as I
right,
say. But letting go of those things, I think, is quite important because
yeah,
we can only deal with one person at a time, and it
yeah,
should be us first and foremost
yeah,
before we try and deal with other people.
yeah.
We need to be equipped.
Yeah, so 2020 teaching us to let go. I really have learned to let
Yeah.
go. Let go.
Mm.
Yeah. I've learned me a lot in 2020, self-acceptance, like like I've never felt before. And again, it comes from, I don't need the validation of other people. And my self acceptance started from the inside and has become external.
Mm.
Myself as a human being, me taking the responsibility of my own healing, me not needing to look how society says I feel like guys think I should. Like, I don't need that validation. That problem would be their problem, not mine. I love and accept myself where I am, my quirks and everything. Um, yeah, and that comes from sitting with within myself, within the discomfort of myself, and understanding this is my human condition. This is me. I'm human with my flaws. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
You can't apologize for that. You can only be
nah,
yourself.
but I
You,
used
you
to.
do,
I used to
you
walk
know?
around apologizing constantly, and I didn't know that. Apologizing for me, my appearance, my
Mm,
thoughts, my
mm,
behaviors, always trying to shift myself so that I can be accepted or appropriate or palatable to others, which is a family dynamic that I learned how
yeah,
to do.
yeah.
Yeah. So I
For
learned
me,
in 2020 is
yeah.
that, yeah.
For me, it was more in friendships. I think trying to
Mm,
change in those environments, and also um, in relationship to those in a position of authority,
mm,
which then bred a lot of resentment towards people in position of power because of how much they
mm,
abuse their power and their
mm.
treatment. So I then painted everybody in the same brush. If you was in a position of authority, automatically I didn't trust you. Do you know what I mean?
Um,
So it's like I was changing myself for people in a position of power only for me to get
oh,
abused by that all the time,
got it,
right?
got it,
To the
got
point
it.
where it was by the time I was like, okay, no, enough is enough.
Right,
I I would then see everybody in that same light.
got it,
Like if you're in a position of authority, it's like, yeah, you're trash.
right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But again, these are things that we unlearn, but we also find a balance from um, being our authentic selves, but also
right.
being truthful about ourselves and being honest,
Which is so necessary. It's so
about ourselves.
necessary.
It's a fine line, right?
So necessary. But
Yeah.
honestly, in a society, in a world that has taught us, especially as Black people, like you're not enough, that you're not okay. In positions like the workplace, you've had to
Mm-hmm.
create and shift yourself to be palatable for those people in the workplace. You've had to. And it's only, well, you didn't have to, but in order to be hired or something like that, it's something where we had to that we learned basically to adapt, and even with our hair, with our speech, with our knowing that authority will be abused and having a certain level of acceptance. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's even stronger for, say, minorities or black, not black people, women. You
Mm-hmm.
know, for white people, white men especially, it's been okay to be your whole 100% self
Mm-hmm.
and still be hired and still be accepted and still be placated, and people are like, oh no, that's just how they are. But it's other people who have had to shift themselves. So getting that message from the world is something that we are now in 2020 mostly learning how to unpack and being like, nah, f that, son, this is how I
Mm-hmm.
am. Not an excuse to be rude or unprofessional or anything like that, but there is a certain flavor that I
Mm-hmm.
bring as myself. As everyone, I am unique, and is um, this is me. So all of me, instead of having to hide portions of myself to be
Mm-hmm.
accepted. And I did that all the way around. I did that with my family. I did that within the workplace. Um, I didn't do that with my friends so much. I didn't do that with
on this platform.
Amen and hallelujah. So, with that, I would say for me, I feel complete, Grace. I don't know
For sure.
how
I
you're
totally
feeling.
agree.
Okay. So I will say, oh, we forgot to do our handles
We can
in the
do it
beginning.
now.
It's okay. So I can be found, again, I am Rachel. I can be found on Instagram as the Sassy Rachel. I've been writing a book, an autobiography is what I am working on. I am also creating a manual for young adults who have experienced trauma in their childhood. And I will be teaching that class once the manual is completed, or teaching the course, so that these young adults have a hope and know how to apply these tools to understand that their lives are flourishing and can flourish as much as the other person. So I'm working on those two projects, and our podcast Instagram is, what is our podcast Instagram?
Soul
It is
Speak is
Soul
at
Speak
Soul Speak underscore podcast.
Podcast.
Yeah.
And we can be found on YouTube and soon Spotify. All right, over to
Yeah.
you, young lady.
Yes, I have been and I am Grace Kugrena. You can be able to find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Grace underscore Kugrena. And you can also find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is at the underscore reading underscore hideout. I write kid lit. I write children's books for those who are from the ages of 5 until 9. They're picture books, and you can be able to find them on Amazon as well as Kindle. And you can also find all the events that I have going on my Instagram page, updates, as well as what I'm doing. You're just keeping up with me, guys. So like, follow, share, subscribe,
Subscribe.
do it on every single platform. And as you watch us grow and flourish, and we welcome you to join us in our Soul Speak family.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for the conversation, Grace. I
As
pray
always, my
that,
pleasure.
thank you. I pray that we have all who are listening have found something to